Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Again, welcome to another emissions of The Professor. As you know, this channel is dedicated to the MNEFS saga, and every time I call it a saga, I know some of you may be laughing, but it is a saga. So we are now focusing on how the investors, or I should say the contributors, can get their money back from the receiver. Now, certainly, I'm not going to go over the entire case with you today, but what I want to talk to you about, it's something very, very important, and I want you to pay attention to it because the information that I'm going to share with you, it's going to help you move closer to getting some of your money back from the receiver. About 2 weeks ago, the receiver filed what we call a motion, which is kind of a legal term for paperwork. You know, it's a motion. And the motion that the receiver filed with the judge was to ask the judge to approve the procedure by which the receiver is going to be able to pay the contributors the money back, the money that he's holding from MNEFX. Now, today the judge, today August 10, the judge in the case approved the receiver's procedure. And certainly this is something that I'm going to share with you because this is very, very important. And I want you to listen. This video, I'm doing it in English because I want to make sure everybody understand. I'm only talking, and please pay attention, I'm only talking about people who have had an account with MNEFX, with the email attached to it, and who actually had received an email in the past year from the receiver. Because the document that I have, the procedure that the receiver put together, actually covers a different group of people. It covers creditors of MNEFX. It covers non-users of MNEFX, non-members of MNEFX, employees of MNEFX, and also users of MNEFX. So let's talk about what it means by users. If you opened an account with MNEFX prior to receiver taking charge of MNEFX, and your account was under your name, your account had your email address, and you have contributed money using that account, that means you are a user, and this video is for you. That's what I'm talking about. That's the only thing I'm talking about today. Now, let's talk about a few things. First of all, for people who have had accounts, who have contributed money, they will receive an email from the receiver. In that email, there will be a link. The link will undoubtedly be the website www.mnefxreceivership.com. So once you receive that email, look for that link. And when you click on that link will take you to the website. And in the website, there will be what we call a transaction log. The transaction log will have all the transactions you've made with MNEFX since you've opened the account. And you will have to verify those transactions. What does it mean? It means that you would have to say, yes, this transaction which occurred on June 10, 2022, I recognize it, or 2021, I recognize it. This transaction that occurred on this date, I recognize it for the amount of money. So you would basically verify those transactions. Once you verify a transaction, you cannot go back to unverify the transaction, or you cannot dispute the transaction. So you got to be very careful when you look at those transactions to make sure that whatever transaction you're looking at, correspond with what you remember, with what you think is right. Now, when we talk about transaction, we're not just talking about money that you put into a mini FX. We're also talking about withdrawal. So that would be a transaction. So in other, if you go in, if you put in 30,000, you withdraw, let's say 10,000, that would be, that withdrawal is also part of a transaction you would have to verify. Now, the good thing about the transaction log as created by the receiver is that it allows you to actually add a transaction that is not there. So in other words, you go in, you look at the transaction, you say, okay, I recognize the transaction, check. I recognize transaction, check. Now, if there's a transaction that is wrong, let's say, for example, you have a transaction that shows you contribute $4,500 on a specific date when you have evidence to show you have actually contributed $10,000 that day. So you could say that transaction is wrong, you dispute that transaction, and make sure you have your evidence to demonstrate why that transaction is wrong. So in that portal, I'm talking about the website, you would also be able to add transactions. So if you have evidence that shows that you have contributed money that are not on the list or on the transaction log, then you can add those transactions because the log would allow you to do that. But when you do that, make sure that you have evidence. Don't just add a transaction because you happen to remember it. No, it doesn't work that way. You have to have evidence to back up what you're adding. Now, if you read the procedures, which I have with me here as I'm talking to you, I receive a copy of all the procedures today from the courthouse. If you read these procedures, it calls it user updates. Okay, so user updates, it's you verifying a transaction, you disputing a transaction because the transaction is incorrect, or you saying this transaction I don't recognize, okay? Or you adding transaction that is not part of the log, okay? So those are the things that you can do as a user with an account with a mini FX, with an established email connected to the account. Now, if you're giving money to somebody else to make an investment for you, and your email is not attached to that, you're not gonna be able to do this. If you have more than one account in a mini FX, let's say, for example, I know people who have an account for themselves, they had an account for their daughters, they have an account for their brothers or their husband or what have you. You're gonna be able to merge all the account together, okay? But listen carefully, these accounts have to be basically under the same email, okay? It has to be connected by the same emails. In other words, you can have an account for your daughter, Jane, but it's under your email. You have an account for your son, Joe, it's under your email. You have an account for your husband, Pierre, it's under your email. You can merge them. The process would allow you to do that. And you can do that, okay? So that's very important. Now, I want you to listen carefully because normally in the situation like this one, there's always a cutoff date. There's always a time frame by which members of the class, and so you guys, the investors or the contributors to a mini FX have to do certain things. Now, in the order that I'm reading right now, what I read earlier today as I'm explaining this to you, the procedure, in the procedure, the receiver says that from the time the judge issued the order, which is, as I'm looking at it now, which is August 10, 2023, then you have 90 days. You have 90 days. When I say you, I'm not talking about every single person in the mini. I'm only talking about members who have had an account with Mini FX, who had an email attached to it. That's who I'm talking about. You have 90 days, which means that from August 10, 2023 to November 10, 2023, this is the time period where you have to go and verify those transaction log, those so-called transaction log, those transactions. Now, What happened after you verify the transaction? Now, the receiver have to wait to see how many people verify transactions. So remember that we spoke before, I spoke before about this, and I said to you, according to the receiver, there are 25,026 people, 25,026 people who actually contributed money to the E-mini-FX, but there are 62,000 users, which means that not all the users contributed money, or maybe they contributed under somebody else. They give the money to somebody else who then, you know, open an account or use that money under their name for them. I don't know, but that's what it is. Now, if you are someone who have received an email from the receiver before, it only means that the receiver has your name, has your email address attached to an account, and that your transaction will be part of that transaction log, and you will be able to go in and verify those transactions or add transactions that are not in your log, in your transaction log, okay? Certainly, this is important for two reasons, because if you miss the deadline, in other words, if you don't verify the transaction before November 10, which the receiver said that here, the receiver said that if a transaction is not verified, that transaction doesn't exist. Now, that 90-day period I just mentioned to you is very important because it's kind of the cut-off date. Now, the receiver has, you know, the wherewithal if he wants, because the judge's order gives the receiver the power to extend that that time frame, okay? That time frame. So in other words, the receiver could say, okay, I'm going to extend it until January 10 or December 10, whatever, if he wants to. My concern is that, and I have raised this concern before, is that we do have a lot of people who may not have access to the computer, who may not know how to use a computer, or who may not even know how to do all of this. And these people may be disadvantaged by the fact of inability to use a computer or to understand. So I'm hoping that the receiver will eventually come publicly in the Haitian community and explain the process. But the process that I have, it's about 15 pages. Let me see. I think it's about 15. Yeah, it's about 15 pages. Now, and not all of the 15 pages have to do with users of E-mini-FX. Like I said before, there are other people that weren't users that are part of this order here that you're looking at. But today, I'm only focusing on those of you who had an open account, who had giving money directly to E-mini-FX. Now, I know some of you that I've spoken to, some of you may say, well, Professor, I did not open an account myself. I gave the money to somebody else, and that person told me he was going to open an account for me. I never get to see the account. I don't know what's going on. Now, if you have never received an email from the receiver, it is a pretty good indication that you didn't have an account. There was no account created under your name. Now, certainly, if an account was created under your name, let's hope that is also attached to your email, because this is how the receiver is going to try to verify, by using the people's email to send you a link. And you're going to use that link to go to the website and then verify those transactions log. I mean, there's a log, there's a list basically. And in the list, you will see your transaction and you'll be able to verify, or you'll be able to say, hey, I have this transaction that I don't see. I want to add one more transaction. But don't add anything unless you can verify it, okay? You can't just add things just because you want to add them. No. You have to verify it. So this part of the video, it's only for people who have account at E-mini-FX. So if you have questions, the professor is always available for questions. Certainly feel free to make a comment. You can ask questions in the comments. Sometimes I read them. I don't always read all the comments, but I peruse them sometime, and if someone has an important question, I try the best that I can to answer them. So if you have a questions, I'm going to try to answer you as soon as possible, because I know time is of the essence. You only have until November to do it. And don't assume that just because the receiver has the ability to extend the verification period, the verification date, that somehow the receiver is going to do it. The receiver may not do it. So I don't want you to say to yourself, okay, well, I have until November 10, but I will wait because I know the receiver can. No, don't do that. This may not happen. Certainly, there are other part of this order, of this procedure, that I think it's important, but for the sake of time and to avoid confusion in terms of what the procedure requires, I don't want to talk about the other parts. I'll do another video where I'll talk about non-users and I talk about all this fancy stuff that the receiver have on the procedure. I will explain it to you and so on and so forth. But one thing I want to say, when you go in the log, most of you, and that is because I've spoken to a lot of you, most of you probably never withdraw any money, okay? Because that was the fraud. The fraud was to keep you invested while others were taking money out. So most of you probably did not withdraw any money. So if you didn't withdraw any money, you will not see a transaction that shows withdrawal. But if you did withdraw some money, then when you go into the website where it's a transaction log with your name and your information, you will see that transaction. Now, if this transaction is something that you remember, something that you actually did, and you did receive the money, you have to verify and say, yes, this transaction I know. And the reason I'm saying that is because this was so fraudulent, there might be a situation where money is withdrawn, that it shows in the computer that the money has been withdrawn, but the person never actually received the money or did not actually withdraw the money. So for that reason, I'm asking all of you to be very careful when you're going into the site. If you do not understand, if for whatever reason it's confusing, if for whatever reason you don't understand, please ask somebody else. I don't know what the receiver is going to do, if the receiver is going to hire people in the Haitian community who could actually explain this to people, or if they're going to then advertise the procedures. Quite frankly, they have a company out in California who's helping with this. I'm gonna reserve comment for that. But you know, let's hope that as many people as possible verify the transaction, because after November 10, if out of the 25,000 contributors to eMiniFX, if a lot of people do not verify the transaction, you're not gonna get any money, because in the rule it says very clearly, if you fail to verify those transactions within the time allowed by the rules, you are out of luck. So I'm telling you, you've got until, August 10 to November 10. This is what the time frame is for now. Okay, I'm reading it from the judge order for now. The receiver at a certain time may say, okay, I'm going to extend it, but do not rely on the receiver extending it. Just do what you have to do within the time frame. Okay? Now, here's the question. I know some of you watching this video and you say, okay, Professor, thank you very much for the information. I'm happy that this process is moving forward. But when the hell am I going to get my money? That's what I like to know. I like to know when I'm going to get that dollar in my hand. Well, okay, here's the answer, all right? Nobody knows when you're going to get the money. And nobody knows exactly how much money you're going to get. Now, having said this, I can tell you based on my experience what I think is going to happen. Doesn't mean it's going to happen the way I said it, but based on my experience, this is what's going to happen. Number one, we have 3 months now, from now until November 10, for the receiver to do the what we call the transaction verification by members of eMiniFX. So that will be done. Then after November 10, or if the receiver extends the time, then we'd have to wait for that extension to expire, expired. And then from that point, the receiver is going to look at his data and see how many accounts are verified and whether or not the receiver agrees with the verification, especially with regard to new verification. Now, when I say new verification, I'm talking about with regard to verification that is not there. I mean, not verification. With regard to transaction that are not there, but transaction that you added to the transaction log, which you are able to do, the receiver has to agree or has to, you have to provide evidence for that. The receiver will not go out of his way to independently verify anything. It says that in the rule. They're not going to do it. So if you have a claim that is not on the list, make sure you have evidence. Make sure you're able to say, hey, this transaction occurred and this did and that did, and this is where the money came from. This is where I send it. And the transaction is not there. Please add that transaction, okay? And provide your evidence. That's the only way it's going to happen. Don't put transaction you can't back up with evidence, okay? Now, once that happened, that first part is over, okay? Then the receiver is going to take some time to analyze everything and make a decisions as to the pro rata share of what each person, based on the contribution, should receive. And that process could take a good, 6 to 9 months if the receiver is working fast. Now, let's assume that there are no lawsuits, there are no contingencies, and nobody is suing the receiver and holding on to the money. Then at that point, the process moves faster. But if there are lawsuits, which could potentially happen, then that would delay things a little bit. So if I have to guess, I would say that you probably will see a check, some kind of money, between 13 to 24 months. When I say 13 to 24 months, I'm thinking that by this time next year, you might see some money. And if things gets complicated, then it might be somewhere in 2025. But you would get something. I mean, I don't know what it would be. In terms of percentage, I would have to guess most people probably going to get between 35 and 52% of their money, of the money that they contributed because of past experience, okay? Now, this is the good news. At least the receiver now has a procedure that everybody can look to start this going, to start the ball rolling. So when the ball starts rolling, he can pick up speed, depends on if there are any bumps. If there are bumps, then okay, that slow the ball down. But if there aren't any bumps in the road, the ball gets speed up and everybody is better because everybody's happy, they get more money. So I am here to answer questions. So as you watch this video, if you have comment, please write them in the comments below. If you haven't subscribed to my channel, you should, because I think this issue is important to you, even though if you weren't an investor of MNEFX, because this fraud was so big. It's something that we're trying to teach the Haitian community how to avoid this type of fraudulent business, so to speak. So please do subscribe or do share that video with someone in your family or someone you know who invests in MNEFX or someone you know kind of interested in that type of thing. Just share the video with them. So I will share more information with you, but today I wanted to share just the specific information. And let me quickly review what I said. One, the receiver have a process put together. Two, the process involves different group of people dealing with MNEFX. But today, this video is about people who had account, still have account with MNEFX and who has the email. So these people, the receiver will send you a link where you have to go and verify transaction in a log. And those transactions will include money you deposited, money you withdraw, and so on and so forth. Now, if there are transactions that you're aware of that are not on the transaction log, you will just add them and make sure you have evidence to back it up. That's basically the information. Also, remember that you have between now, August 10, 11, whatever date you're watching this video, to November 10. And in addition, the receiver can extend the time, but don't bargain or don't rely on the receiver doing it because it might not happen. Stay within what the rule says so that you don't have to be out of luck. So if you know someone who invested in MiniFX, please let them know. And of course, the website for the receiver is www.minifxreceivership.com, okay, .com. So please share the information with your brothers and sisters and people that you know who have invested in MiniFX. And of course, I come to the end of this video. Just want to remind all of you that on August 18, Mr. Alexan, A.J. Alexan, is scheduled to report to the Federal Bureau of Prison, where he will serve his 9-year sentence. And we, of course, myself, all the people who invested in the Haitian community, will focus on getting as much money back as possible. And I will continue to talk to the community about how to avoid that kind of Ponzi scheme. I thank you very much for watching. Keep watching, share the video. If you haven't subscribed, subscribe. And if you do subscribe, you would know when I drop a video, you'll be the first one to know. So thank you very much. Good watching.